Well, to get us started here, would you be able to walk us through your background and how you discovered the internet, hacking, and just the web in general?
Absolutely. Yeah, I graduated in the 80s with a background in graphic design, and I really wanted to go into marketing and advertising. But prior to that, when I was about 12 years old, and so we're talking the 1970s, my father had brought home an Apple I computer. So he was in a place where he was able to buy a computer fairly early, and he decided that it was going to be a good father-daughter activity to learn how to program this computer. There was no hard drive on it, so we had a cassette deck that you had to record your keystrokes onto and then play it back in order to have a program play. And we subscribed to magazines that would send us code. We would learn about the code, input it, and from there, by the time I was about 14 years old, when I was 14, I wrote my first computer program. It was not very sophisticated, but I was really proud of it. So I learned about computers early on. I feel like I can relate to a lot of more current generations, that grew up with computers. And high school, my math teacher watched me, work with their early computers there. They had IBMs, and he watched me do a little bit of coding. And I was probably like a junior, senior in high school. And so he said, "You're my TA." So he had me going around the class and checking everybody's code. So in that sense, I was already interested in it. I graduated into an environment where there were no jobs. So the year I graduated, the job market dried up. And it was also the same year that Tim Berners-Lee had invented the World Wide Web. And I was kind of interested in what was happening in the computing world. And by 1991, I guess, I had learned HTML1.
Sure.
I had started a business and had advertised my business on this very early version of the web. And I got more people asking me about how I was creating this web page than I
Hmm.
did people who wanted to buy my product. So I sold the business and went into web development. And by 93, I had opened up a web company. So that's like my early on. I just, I felt like no matter what I tried to do, the web was calling me. So yeah, that's how I got into web.
I think it's an awesome story. I think it's super cool. Starting at Apple One and really working your way up to web development. There's a lot of people and peers that I'm talking to nowadays that are in their early 20s, just like me, and they're following kind of the same path that you did here. I mean, maybe not starting with Apple One, but definitely starting with a computer and kind of working their way up to web development and some of the other kind of computer science, software engineering, engineering based items, and then maybe stepping a little bit into design. And it's now funny talking to you about this because it's almost like you were the innovator in the path. And I have a bunch of questions just generally about the career path that you took, about you being a white hat hacker. But before I get into all of that, what is your personal definition of a white hat hacker?
Yeah, so white hat hacker to me is somebody who uses their ability to gain access to people or systems for the purpose of good. So, like I follow a very strict code of ethics. There are certain things I will never do. There is certain information I will not disclose if I find it. And I will let the owner of that information know that their information is exposed if it's in the context of white hat hacking. And my entire purpose is to help victims not be victimized, to help owners of systems recognize where they have vulnerabilities, and to make sure that uh, if I'm going after criminals, to make sure that they don't know where they're vulnerable, because we don't want to train them, we don't want to teach them.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you for sharing. So, as a white hat hacker, how did your journey actually begin? Was there like a first kind of aha moment that made you realize how powerful hacking skills can be, and when they're used for good, how powerful they truly are?
Yeah, so I see hacking as having two different worlds. One of the worlds of hacking is hacking people, and that's really social engineering, which I think in some ways takes a lot more, finesse. Then there's also hacking, which is systems hacking. So I started off actually in social engineering, and I worked with a team to infiltrate groups of criminals. And to do that, I had to either pose as a criminal myself, so I had to think in terms of, what their criminal goals were, or to be a victim.
Hmm.
And sometimes as a victim, I would actually create a honeypot in technology and also in terms of social engineering, where and a honeypot pot is basically a very attractive uh, set of a system of technology where the criminal believes that there is something of value in it. And you can either be a honeypot as a victim, where you let them know that you're elderly, you may be cognitively impaired, and you have a lot of money, and so they can start setting up a way to get you to transfer money to them. And a lot of times, I needed to do the social engineering before I could do the systems engineering,
Hmm.
and getting into the systems because there is information I needed to know about the criminal before I could do any white hat hacking with them. I needed to know what bank they do business with. I needed to know what methodologies of transfer are they using. Are they using bank transfer, PayPal, Venmo? What's going on there.
Hmm.
And then I also needed to know if they were posing as an institution. So a lot of those payment methodologies I used social engineering to expose. I connected with a group that together we came up with a way. We were frustrated because we found somebody who had set up a fake banking site, and they were luring a lot of people to hand over credentials to this fake banking site and also to transfer money
Hmm.
through fraudulent processes. This was on an old Red Hat server, and I knew a little bit about Red Hat servers, and we would basically using what we knew about the server technology, using what we knew about forms and databases, we were able to gain access to the particular areas of LDAP database access into these systems so that we could extract all of the data, which included all of the victims' names and their contact information. So we had to do this quietly. And we
Hmm.
had to do it in a way where the owners of these systems would not know that we were in. We would get in, we would alert all of the victims and make sure that they did not alert the fake bank.
Fair.
And then when we knew for a fact that we had all of the victims notified and everybody out of the fraud, then we would just simply shut down the fake bank. But before we did, we would pose as a victim and ask them, let them know, hey, your site isn't working. Do you have another site?
Hmm.
And inevitably, they would spin up another site or they would have had one already. And so they would give us that access to the next site and let us know where it was. And then we would reconvene
Hmm.
and hit them up all over again. And they did not ever actually catch on. There was a whole group of people that were doing fake bank sites. They were all communicating with each other, very similar coding. So one person had just shared out the code.
Hmm.
And I think by the time we were done, we had taken down 20 sites,
Wow.
each one having anywhere from 20 to 100 victims.
Okay, now with the history that you've gone through, how has this line of work affected your perspective on the web and just security in general?
Yeah. So first, I'll say that I'm happy with a lot of the changes that have taken place in the what almost 30 years I've been working with web technologies. Uh, that I'm seeing a lot more protections out there. I'm really happy with the European standards for privacy, even though I know a lot of people here are a little, they find it a little overbearing. I think those are good moves. I think server technology has become far more advanced and safe. There's a lot of old deprecated systems that, your browser will alert you before you're even out there. So In recent changes, even in the Chrome browser, a lot of people noticed that their ad blockers no longer work. That's
Hmm.
due to some more security changes that are taking place. So I'm really happy to see the level of security that's taking place on the technology side. I think really where we're still vulnerable is as human beings, we're still vulnerable to the social engineering side. And so that's where I continue to see on one hand, I've done a lot of work with very, um, you know, vulnerable populations like the elderly, cognitively impaired, people who are going through mental health crises. These are a lot of people who can be victimized on top of having difficult situations in their lives. And I think this work of going after the criminals is so important because with every criminal that we're able to move out of the scamming space, it can save 20 to 100 victims.
Hmm.
So, I constantly think about the old story of the person walking down the beach and seeing, hundreds of starfish and throwing one back, and it mattered to that one. I think it matters. It really matters to humans that we protect them. And so I think my perspective on this, I've become very protective of the humans in my orbit too, and making sure that I check in with my older relatives and make sure that they're not falling victims to scams, or checking in with, my younger relatives who may have some cognitive impairment and make sure
Hmm.
that they're doing okay too.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about everything here today, and the Space Grand Challenge is a little bit about everything. But the main thing that we are truly pushing for is learning by doing and teaching students through our Capture the Flag or the CTF event. From your perspective, what makes this type of competition so valuable for the students that are playing at home?
Yeah. I think, this, what you're doing is you're encountering technology in a snapshot in time. But and I've heard people talk about, well, is this going to be outdated and deprecated by the time I get to my 20s or by the time I get to my 30s? What's the use of learning this today if it's going to go by the wayside later on? But the wonderful thing about technology is when you learn something, you have a basis to compare other things to. And it's really like I always think about learning as being like building out your brain as a basket. And the more you weave into that basket, even if it's, older technology, even if you know that, okay, maybe a couple of years from now it's all going to change, but the more you weave into that basket, the more it holds in the future.
Hmm.
So, um, as a young person, wrapping your head around technology, recognizing strengths and vulnerabilities, recognizing the way things work, how cause and effect, how doing this X, Y, and Z, relates to A, B, and C. All of those things will give you a perspective in the future. So your future work is going to be that much easier and that much more nuanced and informed. So you're really building the foundation of a lifetime of knowledge. And when you get excited about something, it also builds in that passion for learning. And if you can maintain a passion for learning throughout your life, you will have fun every day of your life.
I mean, I think you nailed it right there. The spark for curiosity is probably one of the, like, also my personal opinion, one of the most important, valuable qualities to have as a person. It's like the desire to kind of keep going and keep trying. And the contestants that are now playing the Space Grand Challenge, they're playing it on a Saturday. So that means that they're showing up to a classroom or a club meeting hall, and they are working with the team, spending about 8 hours, potentially more, on this CTF challenge just to develop themselves and their skills and, I don't know, put themselves out there a little bit more. So first of all, I would just want to go ahead and congratulate everybody here. It's amazing to just see this effort in the first place, and it gives me a little bit of hope for the future. So just like you said, spark for curiosity. It's an amazing piece of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am so impressed with this generation, Gen Z and then Gen Alpha right behind them. I I've been working in education for a long time, and I have to say, I think the students in the last, I would say 5 to 7 years are almost more curious, more excited about learning, more, ask more questions, get more in depth with things than in the entire time I've been teaching and working in education. So it's exciting. It really, I mean, they're giving me hope for the future.
And talking about advice, what is actually one piece of advice that you would give our audience today?
You know, talk with your friends, talk with your coworkers. If somebody's trying to get into a system, tell a coworker and
Mm-hmm.
ask if it looks okay. Get a second set of eyes. You know, in some ways, humans are our best security that we have.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time and all of the amazing stories and your feedback and everything. I know that I personally learned a lot, so thank you so much for being here, and have a good rest of your day.
You're so very welcome. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.